Hello everyone. We are still with theme 2, part 3 of theme 2, and still we are the research problem. But this time in parts 1, 2 and 2, in part 1 and part 2, we have talked about the research problem. Let's move now to talk about the statement of the problem. The statement of the problem. As I said before, generally research starts by a problem, and then you have to outline and describe the problem. You have to identify the problem. The problem now is clearly described. The problem is feasible. The problem is, let's say, solvable. Now, this is the problem because at the beginning, as any researcher, especially for novice researchers, they may choose not only one research problem, 3 problems. For example, 2 problems, 3 problems, 4 problems, and then the novice researcher or the master student may, for example, evaluate these problems and definitely chooses one problem among a list of problems and says that this is the problem that I'm going to investigate and to research. Of course, when you choose a problem, there are the answers to the conditions that we have talked about them. We have that the problem is solvable, that the problem is manageable, that the problem is controllable, that the problem is feasible, that the problem is researchable, time factor is satisfied, the solution is applicable, is concrete, is tangible, and the problem and the solution you can study them in your research investigation. Now this is phase 1. Let's move to the statement of the problem. You have now to state of the problem. This is what we are going to talk about it in this second or third part of theme 2, the research problem. When you state a problem, you have to consider that the problem should be concerned with a relation between 2 or more variables. That means you have to identify what the variables in your study, in your problem. Generally, we have the dependent variable on one hand and the independent variable on the other one. The dependent variable concerns the problem itself, and the independent variable is about the solution to that problem. Sometimes we don't have a problem. When we talk about variables, generally the type of study is quantitative. Let's anticipate, talk about the methodology aspect in any research study. When we have to talk about the relationship between the variable, the association between the variable, the correlation between the variable, here we are talking about a quantitative study. But sometimes the study, we are not concerned with the relationship between variables or association or correlation between 2 or more variables, 2, 3 variables. Okay, here we are concerned with the description of a given social phenomenon. Here we are talking about purely descriptive study or qualitative study. So in this case, a problem could be concerned with the description of a given social phenomenon. Also, a problem could be concerned with both the above statement, which means, in other words, that sometimes a researcher is concerned with the relationship between the variables, and also there is the description of a given social phenomenon. A problem should be stated clearly and unambiguously in right form. This is very obvious. That means when it comes to state the problem, it should be stated clearly. Okay. Generally, in a statement of a problem, when it is produced in a written form for novice researchers, master students, I think technically speaking, we can do that in the form of paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. In paragraph 1, just you introduce your topic. In paragraph 2, you talk precisely and clearly, or clearly and precisely about the problem that you are going to research. And in paragraph 3, you try to talk about what would be the solution to that problem. This is technically speaking, we can come to talk about this in details in the coming presentations. Now, concerning delimiting a research problem, we can say that the study should be delimited to certain variables that has to be clearly mentioned in the state of the problem. Again, when you state your problem, any reader can easily identify the variables in your study. They should not be left ambiguous, because ambiguity may lead to confusion. So a good researcher is that one who identifies clearly and precisely all what has to do with his or her research study, investigation. In the statement of the problem, identifying the problem clearly and identifying the variables of the problem, again, clearly and precisely and concisely, is a must. It's a must. The study should be delimited to the research context where it takes place. This simply means that when you state the problem, we can as readers, while reading the statement of the problem, we can know where does the study or investigation take place. This concerns mainly the research context. The study should be delimited to a size of sample considering time, energy, and money. Of course, again, in the statement of the problem, the researcher should identify again and again and again, clearly, concisely, precisely, the targeted population and also the sample that he is or she is approaching. The study should be delimited to the approach, design, and the method or the tools to be used in the study. In the statement of the problem, sometimes this is not I mean the approach, the design, the tools, the instruments, or as we call them today in recent terminology, in methodology, the data collection methods. They are not clearly stated, but we can get inspired from the statement of the problem. What approach is your study going to use? What research design is going to be used in this study? And what data collection methods are going to be used in this study? So this comes from two answers to two questions. The first question, identifying the problem and the solution to the problem, means the variables of your study. And then what to do? Answering the question what to do. Are you going to measure, or are you going to observe, or are you going to measure and observe? Measuring means here you identify the type of design, the type of approach, and if you have the design and the approach, it's obvious the data collection tools, instruments, they follow the approach and the design. The same thing from what to do. The answer to the question what to do, anyone can easily know all these elements that or these components that make up the framework of the methodology to be used in a given particular research study, research investigation. When it comes to evaluate a problem, generally we ask some questions. Let's have a look at these questions or some examples of these questions. The first one, is the problem significant? Significant, I explained this before in previous presentation. Significance means whether the problem is useful for others, beneficial for others. If yes, of course, you go on and you conduct this research study or this research investigation. Is the answer to the main question already available? I mean, if the answer to the significance of the problem is there, so the researcher can go on and conduct this research study. Is the problem feasible? Feasible, which means, in other words, researchable, which means solvable, which means manageable, we could solve. If yes, that's good. Is the researcher skillful enough to collect and analyze data? This is very important. Why? Because research skills, research requires some research skills. Maybe novice research at the beginning they don't have, but they have to develop this in the course of doing the research study, the research investigation. Some research skills are needed at the beginning, and with time they may be developed. The more we do research, the more we develop our research skills as researchers. Okay, and they are also important to conduct any research study. Are pertinent data accessible? That means the data you are looking for them, are they accessible through the data collection tools or instruments? If yes, that will be good for your research study. Does the researcher have enough time to carry out the research investigation? Again, we talk about the time factor, and generally here we are talking about the due time, whether the researcher could realize his or her investigation in due time. If the answer again is affirmative, that's very interesting. If no, this will pose a problem for the researcher to carry out and conduct his or her research study. So time factor is very important. From the very early stages, from the very early time of any investigation, the researcher has to ask this question about the research time factor. This is all about this presentation. Thank you very much indeed.